All right, let's get cooking. Welcome to the latest edition of Chin Check Sports Radio. I'm your host, JD. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to join us. And as always, we welcome any suggestions, feedback, comments, and criticisms, which improves the quality of our program, which ultimately improves your listening experience. Before we get started, we want to send all of you our thank yous for your tremendous support. Again, people are slowly but surely finding out about who we are and what we do. They enjoy and respect the passion with which we speak, but we do this because we love this, as we will continue to share our passions with you all as we build our listening army to take over the world. On this particular edition, I wanted to jump right back into our Chin Check Radio reverie, our fantasy warfare. Obviously, our boxing broadcasts have taken a little bit of a backseat during the football season. But as the NFL has now reached its conclusion, we want to jump right back into our quality programming. Now, if you look on your screen or the link that I sent some close friends of mine, this particular fantasy warfare is going to be between one Terrence Crawford and Paul the Punisher Williams. For any one of my first-time listeners to our fantasy matchups, like most fantasy matchups, we try to find fighters of different eras, same weight classes, really have those barbershop or water cooler or corner discussions about who would win between this fighter from said generation versus another fighter from this said generation. And it's always fun. It makes great discussion, and we definitely enjoy discussing this. So we wanted to jump into both of these guys. Let's start with Terrence Bud Crawford. Bud Crawford started off as lightweight, light welterweight, and now welterweight. A ring record of 38 fights, 38 wins, 29 wins by knockout, and no losses. Now, when we first got to know Bud Crawford, when people first took notice of him, was June of 2014, a KO in the 9th round over then undefeated Yuriorkis Gamboa. Now, go back and watch that fight. That was a very exciting fight. Gamboa actually was winning the early rounds, and something that would become a staple of Bud Crawford's game is the Floyd Mayweather-like ability to adjust his style, to collect that DNA at the beginning, and to make the necessary adjustments, which is what he did, and a very exciting fight, a KO in the 9th round. November of 2014, a unanimous decision over Ray Beltran. April of 2015, a TKO in the 6th round against Thomas Delorme. October of 2015, a TKO in the 10th round versus Dier Rijon. In February of 2016, a TKO in a rather brutal victory over Hank Lundy. July of 2016, a unanimous decision victory over then undefeated one Victor Postal, and because of that fight, retained his WBO light welterweight title and won the WBC and the ring light welterweight titles, or the 140-pound titles. So because of that fight, is now being recognized as the best 140-pound fighter on the planet. December of 2016, a TKO in the 8th round against John Molina. June of 2018, a TKO victory in the 9th round over then undefeated Jeff Horn, who had a rather dubious decision victory over icon Manny Pacquiao. April of 2019, a TKO in the 6th round over Shop Warren Amir Khan. November of 2020, a TKO victory against Shop Warren Kell Brook. And November of 2021, a TKO victory in the 10th round against the always tough Sean Porter. Paul the Punisher Williams fought at welterweight, light middleweight, the 154-pound category, and middleweight at 160 pounds. A total of 43 fights, 41 wins, 27 wins by knockout, and 2 losses. Now, some notable fights from the career of one Paul the Punisher Williams. May of 2006, a TKO in the 10th round against Walter Matisse. August of 2006, a KO in the 4th round against Sean B. Mitchell. Now, this was the fight that really caught a lot of people's attention to who Paul Williams was. This is July of 2007, a unanimous victory over one Antonio Margarito. If you don't know who Antonio Margarito is, known for cheating, caught before the Shane Mosley fight in 2009, where he had some illegal hand wraps, and the late brother Nazim Richardson caught him, and the block fell out, and of course that cast a lot of doubt on a lot of his previous fights, his previous victories, most notably against one Miguel Cotto in 2008. But this guy, Paul Williams, beat Antonio Margarito when he was seen as one of the most, or if not the most, avoided fighter in the welterweight division, let alone in the sport of boxing. And in Carson, California, at the Home Depot Center, Paul Williams came out and fought a brilliant fight. Again, this is right as Antonio Margarito is making a case as the most avoided fighter in boxing. This is right. You're witnessing the rise of one Floyd Money Mayweather, but this is a few months after his big-time fight against Oscar De La Hoya in May of that year. And in that fight, Paul Williams, and I remember that distinctly, where he came out and threw 100 punches in the first round. And we're talking about his activity level, just the ability to just throw a lot of punches, and really his work rate is what won him that fight. Now, I was noticing that towards the end of that fight, that a lot of Margarito's punches was starting to take some effect on Paul Williams. He was starting to slow down a little bit, but just his work rate in the first and especially in the last round, where the fight was getting a little bit closer on the scorecards, I thought Paul Williams really stepped up on the gas pedal, and that really showed true elite conditioning. Clearly appearing to be worn down by Margarito's punches. We might possibly know why he was. But again, a unanimous decision victory against one Antonio Margarito, who was seen as the most avoided fighter in boxing. February of 2008, lost a unanimous decision against one Carlos Quintana. June of 2008, a TKO victory in the first round in the rematch against one Carlos Quintana. November of 2008, a TKO in the 8th round against one Verno Phillips. April of 2009, a unanimous decision victory over slightly shop-worn Ronald Winky Wright. December of 2009, an exciting majority decision victory over one Sergio Martinez. And a very exciting fight. I mean, we're talking about both of these guys trading knockdowns early, knockdowns later on in the fight. A very, very exciting fight. May of 2010, a victory over Kermit Cintron because Cintron wasn't able to continue after falling out of the ring. November of 2010, now at this time, Sergio Martinez has now won the middleweight championship of the world, beating one Kelly Pavlik. In November of 2010, in one of the most brutal one-punch knockouts in boxing history. A left hand from Sergio Martinez, and Paul Williams is out before he even hit the canvas. July of 2011, a majority decision victory against Erislandy Lara, which was very controversial to say the least, where all three judges were actually suspended by the New Jersey State Athletic Commission or their functional equivalent. February of 2012, a unanimous decision victory against Nobuhiro Ishida. And that was the end of Paul Williams' fighting career, because unfortunately, in May of that year of 2012, he crashed his motorcycle in the state of Georgia, trying to swerve in the car, flew off the bike. He was paralyzed, and that ended his fight career. And unfortunately, that was gearing or preparing for a big-time money fight against one Canelo Alvarez. So who knows what could have been. Was Williams the same fighter after that Martinez knockout? Probably not, but of course, they always say solid fighters or great fighters have one last good fight left in them. So now, how do we break down this fantasy matchup between Bud and the Punisher? Now, Bud stands at 5 feet 8 inches tall. So he stands at 5 feet 8 inches tall. Clearly, he is giving up height versus Paul Williams, who stands 6 feet 1. Reach, Paul Williams has a 76-inch reach, and Bud, who has unusually long arms, has a 74-inch reach. So Bud is giving up both height and reach to one Paul Williams. So that would favor Paul Williams. Now, if you look at, now some people might have issues with Bud's body of work because you tend to question who has he really beaten, who has he really faced that other people have not beaten. Yes, he has victories over Shawn Porter, but this is after Shawn Porter has fought the Keith Thurmans and the Errol Spence and the Adrian Broners, the Kell Brooks and this after being beaten by Shawn Porter. I believe he lost, and this is Kell Brook, to one Gennady Golovkin. This is Shop Warner Amir Khan, who has already suffered knockout losses to Canelo Alvarez and the Prescotts and the Danny Garcias. Jeff Horn, again, he was undefeated, but he had a very questionable decision against one Manny Pacquiao, so folks definitely question that. Victor Postal is a solid victory, but folks don't think of great or all-time great when you think of Victor Postal. And the case of Gamboa, eventually started becoming a losing fighter, but again, at the time that they fought, he was undefeated. So and also too, Gamboa was moving up in weight class, so it does make you wonder, was Crawford fighting an actual smaller guy? So those are the conversations that are worth having for the sake of this conversation. But in the case of Bud is supremely talented. Yes, there could be some question marks over his record and who exactly he's beaten. I mentioned that Paul Williams does have that victory over one Antonio Margarito, who was at his peak, who, my personal opinion, had those plasters in his hand that gave him an unfair advantage. So that alone, that quality victory alone, you can give the edge to Paul Williams. But I do have a unanimous decision loss against one Carlos Quintana, as well as a knockout against one Sergio Martinez, and a Lara win that really should have been a loss. So it makes you wonder, how would this fare out? Now, I think in terms of activity, I think Bud would have the edge at least maybe in the first 1 or 2 rounds Paul would have the edge in the first 1 or 2 rounds because of his high work rate. I will give him that. But as we mentioned earlier, Bud does have this uncanny ability to make an adjustment. He is like a Marvin Hagler in the sense that he's very effective in the late Marvin Hagler, that he's very effective in fighting from both an orthodox as well as a southpaw stance, and is equally as good as both. And I can make an argument slightly better as a southpaw, and knows how to make the adjustments, knows how to make the punches work, knows how to figure it out in the mode of a Floyd Mayweather. So he does know how to make those adjustments, and that's why I think I would take Bud by a unanimous decision victory, because I think Bud would do enough to stifle one Paul Williams. Paul Williams was a little bit sloppy, I think, defensively. Even though he was a very offensive fighter, his defense can use a lot of work. And I think that a top quality fighter like Bud would definitely expose a lot of the flaws that Paul Williams had. So that's why we at Chin Check Radio, in a fantasy matchup between Terrence Bud Crawford and Paul the Punisher Williams, we pick Terrence Bud Crawford by unanimous decision, by clear unanimous decision. Again, shading some of the early rounds, but eventually starting to figure out Paul Williams, starting to expose a lot of his flaws defensively and make him pay for it. Take some of the things that Paul Williams does away. Height be damn, reach be damn. And I think that Bud is a bit of a stronger puncher, even though he's not that one-punch knockout puncher. But I think Bud's punches, they can do some damage. I think Bud's punches can eventually wear Paul down, and that's why we will give the nod to Terrence Bud Crawford in a Chin Check Radio fantasy matchup against Paul the Punisher Williams. So that concludes this particular broadcast, and until the next time, it's Chin Check Radio signing out. And please let us know your thoughts and comments about what you all think.